This week on Carlie's Couch, we discuss singleness and why it is vitally important for your life.
Buenos dias. Happy Monday. Welcome to Carlie's Couch once again, aka Lex's standing desk.
It's better than Alexia's attic.
I know, yeah. We've been wilding at some points, but you gotta get it where you at. You lucky you getting any video at all. But I feel like a lot of people like to watch the podcast, as opposed to just listening to it. So
they do, and I actually have, man, I'm so glad that you said that because it made me remember a story that I've been recently told about like feedback about the podcast. So one of my line sisters was at dinner or something with a bunch of people she hadn't seen before. And someone was talking about their job and how their job was so hard, and they were talking to her like, hey, I know you've been dealing with that before. And someone else that listened to the podcast was like, no, I'm living a soft life. And she's like, you listened to the episode this week? And they were like, yeah. So they were able to have a whole conversation about, so shout out to my Neo, my line sister who listened, and actually talk about it in public around other people. We appreciate you.
And shout out to the new subscribers, because at least, with the actual like audio, you don't really see like who's subscribing, all of that. But with the YouTube channel, like I saw today, somebody subscribed and was like, I just subscribed and I can already tell I love this channel. So thank you to everybody who subscribes to the YouTube channel. Please also share the link to the podcast on Apple and on Spotify as well.
Yeah. Thank y'all for listening. And also hit us if y'all have questions or topics or things you want us to discuss. Mm-hmm. We had a pretty great episode that was initiated by a listener's question. And so definitely open for some different formats.
Mm-hmm. And then today's episode, I think, will probably do really well because I feel like anytime we talk about relationships, love, dating, things like that, like everybody tunes in. I guess, that's just a place where folks need a lot of, I don't know, you just need to hear the messages, I guess. Because, like, even with me, like, I love listening to those topics as well. And even to the point sometimes where I'm like, all right, I don't, I know what I need to do. I don't need to listen to a podcast about, like, how to deal with this situation or, X, Y, Z. But today we talk about being single and what that looks like, how it could be beneficial, how we feel about it. So we hope you enjoy this relationship, not this relationship. Hope you enjoy this episode, whether you are in a situationship, single, in a relationship, or whatever. I think you'll definitely get something out of it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of these benefits and things that we're going to focus on about being single are still things you can focus on in a relationship. And that would probably be some of the best things you can do for yourself.
Maybe. Or breaking up.
Yeah, there you go. Or that too. So Lexi, how do you feel about singleness, about being single?
In general?
Yeah, in general.
For me, I think I feel great about being single. I think that being single to me equals freedom, and it equals being more selfish, and it means that I now have options to hang out with whoever I want, do whatever I want, and be on my own time. So for me, when I think about being single, I just think about the freedom and the options to do whatever I want, as opposed to feeling as though, okay, I'm in a space with somebody and, you have to consider them, and, there's certain kind of rules and things to being in a relationship. Not that those are bad, but in being single, I think about it positively. What about you?
I do too. And I don't know if I always had. I don't think I've ever been staunchly against it, but I think as a hopeful romantic, I always want to, be able to build my life with a partner and with that. But to me, singleness is an opportunity to get to know myself better and all of the things you've already said. So I also feel very positive about it. I thought it was important to discuss because I feel like it hasn't always been that way, that being single for women was considered a bad thing. Like you hear about like the old maid, or if you're not married by a certain age, then there must be something wrong with you, or like looked at like there's a fault with us if we don't have a partner by a certain age. And I think that currently and all statistics are kind of pushing towards that, is that more people are choosing to be single or choosing to get divorces or just choosing a different style of life now.
Yeah, and even thinking long term, like I do not necessarily care about or prescribe to, like, I'm not even like moving towards trying to be married necessarily. I'm not trying to, but I'm like very okay with just being single and seeing myself being single. So yeah, that's not even necessarily like a goal. And for me, it's actually kind of a little bit weird when, like, for some people that's like their goal in life. Although there's nothing wrong with it necessarily, but I do know some people who, two different things, like it's on their checklist, which, okay, cool. Part of their life, they want to get married and have a companion, etc. And then for some people where it's like, what do you want to do with yourself? And they want to be married and, raise their family. And that's really like where they want their life to focus. And for me, that's just not a thing for me. So I understand why for a lot of people, like, they don't want to be single, or in being single, they are worried or they feel more anxious, etc. But not for me.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a life goal, but I would say that I do know that, and I've had friends, who even in the past few years of knowing them out in LA, because I feel like because we both grew up in the South in different parts and portions, but I think in the Bible Belt and things like that is kind of like a right, like a goal, like something to
it's a thing you're supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly, a thing you're supposed to do, and so a lot of people back home do that, and often very early, but out here, I've had some friends who that used to be a goal, and as they've grown with themselves, it's kind of been like, wait, why was that my focus? Mm-hmm. So as you get to know yourself more, maybe you realize like, oh, a lot of times you're just socialized to think that's what you should want, or
yeah, it's definitely changed over time for sure.
Yeah, and so, what do you think are some of the struggles and or fears that accompany like being single or being by yourself?
I think the biggest thing is like people don't want to necessarily be alone, and not just like being alone for the day, but you do want companionship. As a single person, you want companionship. You would like to have somebody who's not just like in and out necessarily. Maybe somebody that you feel like you actually can trust, that you can be practice more intimacy with, as far as them really knowing you and maybe your vulnerabilities, and you could tell your secrets to or speak with. And that companionship is different than just like your go-to friends. You may want that companionship of like just a consistent person who's around. So I think that's one of the biggest struggles with it, is that lack of somebody you're like super close with.
Yeah, like somebody to do life with, essentially, to build with, all that. I can see that. You hear a lot of people or I guess we see it a lot in like, what is that word? Not social media, but in interviews and stuff, people are like, yeah, you don't want to die alone, or, you can build all this wealth, but then who can you share it with? And so I think there's a lot of pressure around that. I think also, if we are looking at, social media and trying to keep up with the Joneses, you can kind of feel left out if like all your friends get married and you're like the only single person. And so it might be pressure to
left out of what?
I don't like, I don't
left out of people being like, where you at all day? Left out of people, you having to run errands all day? Left out of like, oh, I got to be home. Like, I mean, it depends on that. Like, I literally, and it's kind of sad to say, like, I literally do not know a married couple that makes me be like, wow, I really want to get married. Like, not a single one. And not to say that that doesn't exist, or that, not even to say that they're not happy or anything. It just, nothing sparks me to be like, oh, wow, like, that's so amazing. And so I guess I understand that there's people who might feel left out for sure. And I think that goes back to like people who may have a goal, or who really like, that's something they look forward to in their life. And it depends on what you value at the end of the day. Like, your values may be that companionship, as opposed to like being more independent. So I think that's probably what it boils down to, as far as like what's really important to you.
And the last big fear I could kind of think of is like, if you really want to have a family and you feel like you don't have that partner, like you might be running out of time, or you might not want to do something alone that, could be your goal. And I think that's a spark for a lot of women, because there's a lot of pressure around that. Like, in one of my group chats the other day, people were talking about freezing eggs. That's a whole thing. Like, if that's something that you want to do.
Mm-hmm. What would you say are some of the things personally for you that maybe not all the way a struggle, but like that you're like, this is like the kind of a downside to being single? And also in single, sorry to backtrack it, but are we referring to like legit single, like you're not married, or are we referring to like you don't have a partner or like boyfriend, girlfriend, or something like that?
I would say probably not a committed relationship. Single.
Okay.
So maybe you could be dating or have someone, have one or some, or, some people or whatever kind of going on. But I think if I had to think about the drawbacks is having that steady person, to be there through things. What could be one, like the intimacy, because I'm definitely, love to spend time with people and stuff like that. So that could be a drawback. I would also say, living in LA, not being able to split rent, because look, baby, paying for everything.
That's a good point though, because I think some of the things that push folks towards like, oh, let's do this is because of finances, right? So imagine if it's like, if I got $2 million in the bank, I'm probably not so pressed, you know what I mean, to like get married or to feel like I need to be in a relationship. So I think that's something important to ask yourself and to understand about, like, what is it about it that I do kind of like, dang, I feel like I want to be there or not be there. And it may be really take you back to being like, okay, really, maybe like I want to make more money, or like I want, you know what I mean? Like, or I want closer friends or other things, right? That you may really be trying to get or really want, as opposed to like trying to fill that with a relationship.
And I think that's an excellent point, is looking at what those gaps are you could be trying to fill. I'm trying to think if there are any more, because I think that the benefits of being single far outweigh the other pieces of it. But if I'm like thinking about struggles, financial could be a real one. Having someone there, like, if you had a hard day, like always having, support, like always having to do everything by yourself. But you could look at, there's a positive and a negative side of that. Can you think of any struggles?
For me personally, what mine are?
Being single.
For me, I would say the biggest things for me and being single that I'm like, but I also have a solution. All of them, I would say is that I do enjoy, I don't necessarily need it though, but I do enjoy hanging out with somebody that you can really like get super close with and do things with, whether you're traveling or, they know like the nitty gritty of like your day to day, things like that. But I do have also like a really good friend group with whom like I know who I can talk to about anything. I do go on a lot of like friend trips and do things like that, so that you can do. But to have that full package too of like closeness, from physical intimacy to like mental, etc. It is nice to have somebody or people that like you really feel like you can connect with. But again, like, I think that might be it. That's like kind of like after a while, like, so for example, if I travel a lot by myself, like after a while I'm like, man, I don't want to just, do certain things by myself anymore. I would like to experience that with somebody else. But do I need to be in a committed relationship to do that also? Not exactly.
Yeah, and you said physical intimacy. When I was thinking, the only other thing I could think of is consistent sex, or that type of physical intimacy. Like if you don't have people that you trust, or that, you were at that level with, where you feel like you can share that part of yourself, like that might be hard to not have that in the cuddles and stuff. You know.
What's the longest period that you've been single? Like for how long? Maybe like since you've been dating?
Yeah, since I've been dating.
Because mine's long.
I was about to say probably almost 2 years. It might
single.
Yeah,
that's it. Oh,
like saying, because I'm counting like other like serious, like thought I was talking to people. I'm counting that as a relationship. But if we talking about being in an actual for real committed relationship, that ain't been since college.
Or maybe it needs to be like acting single.
I was about to say, because I haven't been in a like for real committed, like we're working towards this thing relationship since college. So like it depends on how you define single, but I'll say to where I wasn't talking to nobody. Like I think if you were exclusive though,
I would kind of like consider that like, okay, I was.
Well then, so I would say like a little, like 2 years, a little over 2 years, but I really wasn't talking to nobody. And if I was, it was a date here, a date there, but it was nothing like consistent, nothing exclusive, nothing, anything at all.
Got you. Yeah, I was single before my last relationship. I was single for 8 years. And during that time, there's people I would just like date or hang out with or was getting to know, but nobody that I was like really like in a committed relationship with, or even like necessarily like they were like the moon and stars per se. maybe kind of a little was kind of getting there, but like not at all. So yeah, I think I also like before my last relationship, like I was really comfortable. Like I was not necessarily pressed, and I was kind of nervous. I was like, dang, like I just don't even like nobody. Like that's kind of the biggest thing is like nobody's sparking me per se. Nobody makes me like excited or anything like that. So I mean, I was fine being single because again, like for me, that makes me feel like okay, I have options and I can do what I want.
No, and I think that's another like really important point for me. It was like I used to be a habitual monogamist. Like I would just be in a long relationship, and then the next relationship was long, and the next relationship was long, and I was like, man, bump this. Like I need to spend some time by myself. Like y'all doing a lot, and I'm really on this journey to figure out kind of who I am, and that's also dealing with like trash ass situationships on the interim because we've all been in those.
Yeah, but like you said, more people are choosing to be single, or at least like recognizing like, okay, I'm single and that's okay. I'm cool with that. And I know Carlie did some research to find like some numbers behind that as well.
Yeah. So 40% of people 30 and older are single, and that's like men and women, which is like vastly more than it ever has been in the past. And there's actually more men that are single than women for like the first time ever. Like I think it's 30 plus. It's like 36% of men compared to 32% of women. And I just think it's interesting, like looking at those tides kind of change because for a long time we've all been fed the narrative, you know, go to college, get married, have kids, and now everybody's starting to question these systems. Like, you know, is it really beneficial for me? Like how does this actually work for me? And on top of that, I think that now that women have more rights and more access and more things, like we're not stuck in situations that we used to be. Like they talk about how our grandparents' marriages lasted, you know, 80 years. And it's like, yeah, bro, they couldn't get their own bank account. Like what they gonna do?
Yeah. So what are some other things you think maybe are contributing to more people being single? I also think it's like, for sure, finances that change, like financial situations, is not necessarily like you have to do that to be, like you have to be dependent on somebody else to move through the world. I also think education-wise, I don't know if it's still true, but last time I checked, women have higher education, smarter, having higher paying jobs, which might take more time, which might change their priorities of what's important. Like that's probably kind of like with me. Like my priorities just changed to where like that's just not it.
I wonder if access has anything to do with it, because back in the day, you really knew the people at your church, at your job, in your city, in your town, whatever. But now it's like we have access, like we have all these dating apps, more options.
Yeah, I think, but for a person who is like they feel like they need to be in a relationship or want to be in a relationship, that they also have more options to get in a relationship though. So there could be something to that. That there could be something to that, like for folks who are afraid of commitment or scared of commitment and things like that, where it's like I don't need to settle down because I can have all these options. I think that can go both ways, just depending on you. But also maybe it has to do with like I feel like with each generation things kind of change, and with our generation now, we are what, millennials. With our generation, like our parents were like, all right, we got to work hard and do all these things. Now it's like, I feel like we want a little more freedom, and it probably even more so like beneath us. But I can only speak for my age and for my group. But like, I think we kind of desire a little more freedom. We desire like the situation that we actually want. So you don't feel like you have to do something as much. You don't feel like you have to settle as much, or maybe we have like a higher like lofty of like, okay, I want this and I have these standards and that's what I want to find. So I think kind of just like the outlook has changed a little bit. My parents got married. My mom was 18 and my dad was 20 something when they got married. So I don't know. For me, I'm like, yeah, that's a no-go. This is not it for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of people's story. Like I think about Kiara's parents who were on here, Mr. and Mrs. Williams. Like they got married, you know, younger as well. A lot of those people did. I think another contributing factor goes to what you were saying about us not settling. Like in this new age of healing and social and emotional learning and intelligence and going to therapy and stuff, I've been reading a lot of articles, or seeing them at least, about how the social dynamic of relationships and marriages has to change. And that's why people are opting out of quote unquote traditional things, because it's not serving us.
And it's funny that you put this here. Carlie put this information on the sheet, and I was already going to mention this too. It's like, nowadays marriage benefits men more than women in general. Men, and I was actually talking with a guy the other day where he's like, yeah, it's like when, because he was sick actually, and it was like, damn, like I don't feel like taking care of people, like, but it's like for women, it's like getting married is like, it adds more stress, your health decreases, and I think a lot of that becomes like when you fall into a mom role, which is about finding the right partner as well, but for men, it's like they get extra support, and they're getting an organizer and a taking care of. They're getting another mom a lot of times, right? And that goes to a lot of other like psychological stuff, but many times it's just more beneficial for men. Even I think financially, to be honest, something I saw where it's like it's a financial benefit for men as well. So, which is interesting because I feel like a lot of the conversation is around women wanting to get married, whereas men are actually getting the most out of that.
Mm-hmm. And another stat that I found interesting was that nearly 70% of all divorces are initiated by women. So it sounds like we're like, yeah, nah, this ain't gonna work for me, dog. Sorry.
Yeah, if you're not trying to be a caretaker. So why is it important to be okay with being single?
One of the biggest things for me is you're always going to be with yourself. Like if you choose to get married, if you don't, if you choose to have kids, if you don't, if you choose to hang out with your friends, you're always going to be with yourself. So why not like spend time getting to know who you are, and, you know, knowing what you need and knowing what you want, and learning to love yourself. Like truly, I know that that's, you know, buzzword, whatever, self-care, self-love, but truly you're really only with yourself all the time. So why not use that extra time that you're not focused on anything or anybody else to pour into yourself?
I think it's important to be okay with it too, because being single is better, much better than being in a situation that is not good for you, or that you're not all the way in. Like, as far as being in a relationship or being married or whatever it is, just to be doing that, it's always just better to be single than to be doing that. Because I mean, like, where else are you going with that? Again, though, for a lot of people, and I know some people that I'm close with, who they got in relationships or they were married and that's what they wanted, and yet then they realized like they were kind of stifled in like growing into doing anything else that they wanted to do or be or change, you know. And so it is important to know yourself, which is why it's important to be okay being single, so you can use that time to know yourself. But also it's just important to like not rush things or not try to fill up a space that, again, you can probably figure out like who you really are and what you really want to be doing before it's like too late and now you can't really do anything about it.
And I think the last one, like in addition to that, is to just appreciate where you are in the moment instead of like wanting to be anywhere else. Like the present is a gift, Lil Wayne. And so making sure that you're enjoying it and learning the lessons and the things that you can there, instead of like always being in a state where you want the next thing or you want something different, because then you really miss out on a lot of the value that is currently happening.
And high key, I would say that if you're not okay being single, that's probably like a red flag sign for you being in a relationship anyway. You're probably about to lose yourself like shit. And yeah, like if you're not okay being single, I think that signals a lot of things that really need to focus on, and signals a relationship being something that you're trying to like fill up a hole with.
So examine that, if you are in a relationship or not.
Yeah, and there's a lot of benefits to being single. I think, like we talked about, kind of why it's hard and the struggles, because definitely, like socially, we are like raised to like get together and start a family and know how to cook and clean and all these things, right? Like, which tend to be very service based. We don't teach as much about the emotional stuff that we need to, but there are a lot of benefits to being single as well.
The first one, just reiterating, you have all of your time to yourself to spend however you choose. Opportunity to focus on, you and the development, the healing, the growth, the expansion of yourself.
And when you're single, you're actually more likely to have higher goals. When you're only thinking about yourself, and when you don't have the hindrance, and not necessarily in a bad way, but like you don't have to consider your wife, you don't have to consider your children per se. You may have higher goals of doing more with your time, or of achieving something or doing something that you wouldn't have when you're in a relationship.
Another one is spontaneity. Fun because you're not accountable to anybody else. You get to do literally on the drop of a dime. Yeah, let me fly to Greece. Let me, do whatever. Oh, man, yeah, I can go to a concert tonight because you're not about to cook dinner for your partner and your kids or whatever.
And then also, as a single person, you tend to be more active. And I know for sure this is with me, because as soon as I'm like with somebody or whatever, you get real booed up. You just want to chill, watch shows, and not to say that you can't be an active couple at all, or you can get out and do things, but you do tend to be, I think, a little bit more stationary and not as active. Maybe not exploring as much, or getting out and about and figuring out like the things you like or don't like, etc. It almost feels like you're kind of in a settled down mode, which makes sense.
Yeah. Another one is building connection with like your friends, your coworkers, with, any random people that you might not have, like the time that you might not have, or you might not make time for those people or those opportunities while you're in a relationship. Because a lot of people tend to do that. Like, oh, now let me focus all my attention on this. And then they kind of like starve their other relationships. And so when you're single, you can pour all of that into all of your friends.
Yeah, which also makes sense too, right? Like once you're married, have a family, etc., like a lot of your time is going to go there, and you may not be able to come to the functions as much or go hang out as much with your friends. But yeah, being single, you do have that option. Also, you can save a lot of money. I know as soon as you start dating, you be like, dang, all of a sudden, like this costs a lot. Like going out to eat, or like when you go do something, considering, do they need something? Do they want something? Paying for things, buying things, just all the expenses of being in a relationship, they really do add up. You can save a little bit more when you're single, and or at least when you're spending money, it's for yourself, so you don't even really necessarily feel like some kind of way if something were to like go down, or maybe you're resentful of like some hobby that your wife only wants Chanel, or like whatever it might be. So that's a big plus too.
And one of the biggest takeaways from being single is in this space where you're exploring yourself and your friends and activities and adventuring, you really get to learn what you want and need from relationships, and you can trial and error. So dating different people, saying, oh, I like that, I don't like that, like trying different things so you don't end up settling for people who might not be right for you.
But one caveat I will add though to that is a benefit of being single is that you get to date. And I think that as much as people say things like, oh, come to the relationship healed and ready and know what you want, all of that, I think a lot of times really you learn yourself through a relationship with other people, because you're really seeing how you're behaving with that person. Like, I don't know my communication is what it is until now I'm in the position of like, this is where you practice it sometimes. You get to date, you get to learn more about yourself and your relationship style and what you want through dating as well. You get to have fun through dating without it being like all the commitment. You get to practice those characteristics. You get to practice opening up, practice whatever it is through dating, and still have a good time, have people to hang out with and do things with without necessarily having to be in a relationship. So you could still be single and like really enjoy life and have a full grasp of life.
Yeah. And that kind of like pours into the next question. What are some of the greatest lessons that you've learned from being single or singleness?
Lessons
or takeaways?
I don't know. Do you have any off top?
That's definitely why I shot it to you.
A lesson. I'm trying to like think about like what's real and not like just something in hindsight that seems easy to say, but a great lesson from singleness. I don't know. I think I might have gotten more lessons from
being in a relationship. Yeah,
from relationships that actually allow me to be more okay being single.
I have one. In the reflection time that I've had, like in between relationships and outside of like dating or talking to people, it let me realize where I was losing myself and where I was trying to use other people to fill gaps that maybe I didn't notice in the moment because I was so into the person or so into whatever was happening. And so that reflection time really helped me get to know myself better, and understand, like, be able to set up boundaries and things so I don't do that in the future, so that my next relationships got better. So in that time is like, oh, looking back, reflecting, like, oh man, I don't like that. I want to learn how to choose myself more and kind of take these lessons into, my next relationship.
But that's definitely something you got to practice, like, in the next relationship, though, because everybody afterwards, or while you're single, is like, oh, okay, I see I lost myself. I'm not going to do that again. And then, like, as soon as you start talking to somebody, you really have to, like, check yourself. And that's something still really to practice. So for me, I would say one of the greatest lessons I learned in singleness is that I can have and do whatever I want. So by that, I mean, like, I could talk to this person if I want. As soon as I see something I don't like, I don't have to deal with that. And I think just the freedom, like, in singleness is the biggest lesson, like, that you could really find whatever you're looking for, and you can ask for whatever you want. If you want somebody to be showering you with gifts, you can find that. If you want somebody who, like, leaves you alone, you can find that. Whatever you want to do, you can do. And so to really embrace that and to really think about what you want, regardless of how selfish it is or whatever, like, you can do that. And I think it allows you to practice asking for what you want, especially from other people if you're dating, or of yourself, and being okay with, like, just living in that way, like, really, really realizing, like, oh, I was sitting here, like, tied up, or, I wanted this and it was so hard for them. And, like, you really start to see more of, like, oh, people will actually, there's a better fit, and people can actually do the things that you actually desire out of a relationship.
Yeah. And that is it, folks. I think that's a great ending point, and also a reminder, there's like 8 billion people in the world, so
it really is.
Yo,
like, but it's easy to say that, right? Like, it takes a long time. Like, if you're coming out of a relationship, it takes a long time to, like, move on, and it's really, really hard. And I think a lot of that is because we either, like, kind of tie our worth into something, or we're thinking, like, man, if I'm such a good person, why are we not still together? Why is something not working? We're over responsible. And a lot of other things. And so it's really important to, like, get back to you, what you need, what you want. And in hindsight, to think about, like, not romanticizing relationships necessarily, not romanticizing the relationships that you see in others, because every situation has, like, its downfalls, it's good and bad. And so to really, like, be realistic about it, like, how happy are you? And if you're not feeling happy in your singleness, then what is that, like, why not? And really kind of thinking about what you can do in that space, and, like, what does that mean to, like, not fill it with a relationship or trying to fill it with another person, but how can you try to fill that out with being single?
So hit us up at Carlie's Couch and answer that question if you are in this space of singleness. Would also love to hear y'all's greatest lessons from being single. Yeah, because that relationship is not going to fix that hole. It's not. You're going to have to work on that. So hit us at Carlie's Couch on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all the places. Let us know. We'd love to hear that. And then this week's question of the week is, we also need some shout outs, y'all, because we've had a couple of weeks where there ain't no shout outs, and I'm trying to celebrate good things. So also hit us and let us know, how we can celebrate you. And so the question of the week is, do you have any nicknames, or, like, someone that people might not know that you
asking me?
Yeah.
Yeah, 3 I can think of off the top that nobody will really know like that. I have a nickname, Scene, Xin, and that came from my best friend from college, Jessica, who somehow she started being like Lexina, and then somehow that shortened to Scene, and so she'd be like, Scene, come here. So it's interesting how you can have a nickname that came from a nickname. So that's one, like, nobody would think about, Scene. I have another one from my friends in Spain in 2005. We were out there. She used to call me Lexi Lou, like Lucy Lou. So I used to get called Lexi Lou. I had a friend who used to call me Lecky Poo. I don't know what that was about. I think that's 3. And then Dora sometimes. In college, I would get called Dora for my middle name. Those are
only the vibe. I forgot about that. I just thought it was the Bob. That's funny.
I didn't have Bob at that time, but I was still, like, kind of, I spoke Spanish and was exploring all that stuff. So some people call me Dora. I think that's the only ones outside of like obviously like Lex, Lexi.
Yeah, those are good. And it's funny how nicknames become shorter. That always is so funny.
Yeah, to where it's like, where did that come from?
Yeah, so mine, a shortened one, I get called Carlito. Shout out to the brothers from OU. We were on a trip. We do a float trip every year, and they just started calling me Carlito. So that's the thing. So then it became Lito and different things.
Carlos sometimes.
Carlos for sure. And then also in high school.
They just calling you out of your name.
All the time. Every time. In high school, I had a nickname Big Hungry because I would just eat. Big Hungry boy, always down to eat. And I think that's carried over. Appetite not as big, but I'm mostly always down to get some good food. So would also like to hear y'all's funny nicknames or nicknames that people might not know. Again, hit us at Carlie's Couch and hope y'all have a good day.
Yeah, have a good day. Have a good week. We'll see you next time.